What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the Severe MMA preview show. Paul Brown here, and today I'm going to be previewing this weekend's UFC Fight Night Macao, China. Now, it's not a card that's actually taking place at nighttime because, thankfully for us European fans, we finally get a card that takes place in the daytime for us. I believe the main card begins at something like 11 a.m. Irish time, which that's pretty fantastic news for me, to be honest, because I'll generally be working on a Saturday night at some fights, which I'm going to be this Saturday evening, and still get to sit down and maybe catch some of these fights live as they happen. Kind of a rarity for me, and probably for a lot of you guys who don't go through with the whole staying up all night kind of thing, you know. But it's an interesting card, you know. I'm not going to keep you guys all day on the preview here today, but there is a handful of fights in there that really, really piqued my interest. And I might kind of take a closer look at one or two of them and then just run you through the rest of what's on the card. So a few months ago, I did a podcast here on the Severe MMA Patreon, and I basically chose one matchup that I would like the UFC matchmakers to make in every single weight class. And the one I chose for the bantamweight division was the one that sits atop this UFC Fight Night card at the weekend. It was Deiveson Figueiredo and Petr Yan. Now, I think this is an absolutely sensational matchup. There's plenty of reasons to get excited about it. Both guys are brilliant strikers, brilliant all-round fighters, but it's the difference that they have, the contrast in their striking styles, that really makes this one, brings a lot of questions to the front for me on this one. I'm very interested to see how they look standing in front of each other. Petr Yan is very, very good at boxing. He loves to get inside the pocket. His use of things like body shots, uppercuts. He's very, very good at getting into that boxing range and getting his flow going from there. He's powerful, he's fast, he's dynamic, and everything he does is very technically sound. He's good at covering range to get into that space, covering distance, should I say, to get into that range. He'll shift through on his shots to get himself right into that pocket and stay in there and let the combinations fly from there, which isn't a skill that you see a lot of MMA fighters have. They'll use one or two shots to set up kicks or to maybe set up the opportunity for takedowns, but to actually stand in boxing range and throw combinations like Petr Yan does, it's a different type of skill set altogether. You contrast that with the style of Deiveson Figueiredo. Now, Figgy is a brilliant all-round athlete, and he's really good on the canvas. You know, when the fight hits the ground, he's a real submission threat, and he has looked exceptional since his move up to 135 pounds. But even still, at striking range, his style very different to Petr Yan's. He likes to maybe stay at a kind of further range. He likes to stay away from his opponent a little bit, skirt a little bit on the outside, throw some feints, some slight unorthodox movements, switching between stances, and then get in and get out, do his damage and get back out again. He does have power in his hands too, you know. And even though he's moved up a weight class, what's working really well for him since the move up, I think he's 3-0 now in the bantamweight division since the move up, is his speed. He has a speed advantage on a lot of the opponents he's fighting. He fought very, very well, I thought, against Marlon Vera in his last outing. He really displayed just that speed advantage that he has. Now, one thing that he struggled with was, you know, the physicality. Like he tried over and over again to take down Marlon Vera. I think he got him down early in the fight, but then for a large portion of the fight from there on, he tried repeatedly to get him down, and it was just like bouncing off a brick wall. So it's going to be difficult for him to do things like implement his wrestling, especially against someone like Petr Yan, who has very, very good defensive wrestling. Yan, for his, and a lot of his performances. Now, we know he went through that skid where he lost 3 fights in a row, and that certainly seemed to knock his confidence. But then when you look back on those fights, I mean, you look at the Sean O'Malley fight, and you could make a very big case for him having won that fight. You know, I certainly thought he had done enough. I think it was a split decision at the time. And then the other losses he had, Merab, who of course has gone on now to prove himself to be pretty much unbeatable by anyone he's faced at this point. But you know, he has to yet get in there against Umar Nurmagomedov, should I say. I'm confused with Usman, who got his fight announced today. But yeah, Petr Yan has looked very good against those outside of that bracket. The guys he struggled again, of course, Merab took him down and really put it on him, and he struggled to get anything going in that fight. And of course, Aljamain Sterling got him down and got to his back and caused him some real problems there. But outside of those guys, not a lot of other fighters in the division have been able to really implement a heavy wrestling style on him. He is He's quite a strong athlete. He's well built. He's strong. He's physically dynamic, and he can handle most guys in that range. But it's the likes of Marab and probably the guy who's most likely going to be the next champ, Umar Nurmagomedov. Those guys are maybe going to be a step too far from him. But he did come back after losing those three fights in a row, and he did pick up a win in his last one against Keenan Song. Was it Keenan Song? Yeah, Keenan Song. And he looked excellent. It did take him a round to get going. I'm just going to see. Was it a split? It was a unanimous decision, wasn't it, that he won by? And Yadong Song, my apologies, Yadong Song. There's too many songs in the UFC these days. But yeah, against Yadong Song, he was kind of wary of the Team Alpha Male guy's power in that opening round. You could see he was a little bit tentative. He was like kind of almost flinching or blinking as he was squinting, as he was throwing one shot at a time. He wasn't really committing to his combinations. Once he kind of got over that and realized, right, I'm a round down. I've lost my last three fights in a row. I have to step on the gas here. And he started to just get into his flow and let those combinations go. And it was in the latter part of round two where he really started to find some success with his boxing. Close range, the uppercuts in particular, looked sensational. He's got power in those hands. Everything he does is very tidy and effective and efficient. And he just knows how to crack somebody. It's usually the third or fourth punch in some of those combinations. He'll throw those combinations not really looking to do damage, but with 60-70% behind most of the punches. But then he'll finish that combination with one big shot. So if he can get to that range against Figueiredo, which is going to be difficult to do, that's where he'll be confident of doing the most damage. He's got that little bit of a size advantage over his Brazilian opponent, who of course we mentioned has come up from flyweight, but he's also he is very physically strong himself, the Brazilian. But like I said, he's not going to be going in there and manhandling opponents at the bantamweight division. He's going to be trying to rely on his speed to get him in and out of harm's way and do his damage from there. I'm interested to see if the fight does hit the mat, what Figueiredo can do from a grappling perspective. Like, can he implement his jiu-jitsu against guys in this weight class, especially guys in the upper tier? I mean, you look at both of these guys and where they are in the division. So I think I spoke about this on that previous podcast I did. And in the division, we know that Umar Nurmagomedov is most likely going to be getting that next shot. I mean, Sean O'Malley has sort of intimated that he's going to be out for a little while. And I think he didn't have hip surgery, or he's going for hip surgery. So the rumours of him getting the next title shot, I mean, you can probably take those with a pinch of salt, but you've got Umar Nurmagomedov lined up there most likely for that shot. O'Malley's going to be in the mix, but outside of that, I mean, Corey Sandhagen is coming off a loss to Umar Nurmagomedov. And then once you look past Piotr Jan, who's third, and Davison Figueiredo, who's fifth, everybody else outside of that, you can maybe discount them from title talk. Marlon Chito Vera, Henry Cejudo, Song Yadong, Rob Font. Those are the next guys down. So I don't think you're looking at a title contender there. So the winner here will probably position themselves either for a follow-up title shot after Umar gets his. Depending on what's going on with Sean O'Malley, they might then be thrust into a number one contender fight with one of those guys, maybe O'Malley. So, there's big things at stake here for the winner, and it's a very interesting matchup. But like I said earlier, it's one of the fights I most want to see in the UFC, because I just like how both guys go about their business, and it's a very exciting headliner. Outside of that, we're going to look at the remainder of the card. We'll kind of gloss through, and there might be one or two fights I'll take a little closer inspection at, but we'll sort of glance through these guys here. And the co-main event, we've got Yan Xiaonan facing Tabitha Ricci. Now, the women's strawweight division, we've seen Yan Xiaonan sort of come up short a little bit when she's faced people at the top end of the division. And right now, she's facing a rising contender who has been winning fights but not beating anybody of a huge name value in that division. So I think she's 1-6 in her last 7. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1-6 in her last 7. Only defeat coming by way of split decision to Lupi Godinez. most of those wins have come by way of decision. I think there was one finish over Jessica Penn in there. So she probably does need that big name win, and they're positioning her here. Maybe Yan Jianan could be that person that she beats to bring herself maybe into the title discussion. I don't think it's going to be too easy. Yan Jianan is no easy way out, or she's no easy night out. I mean, her results in the UFC, over the last while, she's lost 3 of her last 5, but her losses have been against Weili Zhang, Marina Rodriguez, who's very good, and of course another former champion in Carla Esparza. So not an easy day out at the office. So it's sink or swim time for Richie, really, in that co-main event. Moving on down the card and looking past that, we have Keenan Song. Now, there you go. There's that other song that I was talking about. And he's in there with Muslim Salikov. Now, Muslim Salikov, I believe he's something like 39 or 40 years old. Let me check here. 40 years old, yeah. So he's been sort of, floating around the UFC now over the last few years and has some decent wins on his record there. Eliseo Zaleski is a real handful. Francisco Trinaldo. But then guys have beaten him, the likes of Li Jingliang, Nicholas Dalby, Randy Brown. Solid fighters, not guys who are in and around title discussion, but just guys who are, of a certain level where they're going to be a difficult test for most fighters. And that's kind of say, you got to get past those guys if you want to move on to the next level. And of course, Salikov just sort of failed to do that. Now he's in there with Keenan Song. What way is Keenan Song looking at the moment? He'll of course have massive support, being a Chinese fighter himself and fighting in Macau. He's 6-4 in the UFC, and his defeats. I mean, he lost that fight to Gary, didn't he? Where Gary finished him in the 3rd round. He's won 2 of 3 since then. Kevin Jusey, of course, he lost to Kevin Jusey. So, he's had a decent enough run in the UFC, but just like his opponent, when he comes up against guys of a relatively decent level, he kind of finds it difficult. We have, after that, Kong Wang and Gabriela Fernandez in the women's flyweight division. Moving down past that, there's a fascinating matchup here in the men's light heavyweight division. Volkan Ozdemir is fighting Carlos Ulberg. Now, Ozdemir is a very interesting cat. He's coming off a couple of wins still, and he's been around for a hell of a long time. 35 now, and he's got 13 knockout wins on his record. He's 8-6 in the UFC. He's won his last couple and he's finished both of them. Of course, he had that spectacular knockout over Johnny Walker in his last fight. That was back in June. Prior to that, he fought last September and he strangled Bogdan Gustov in the 1st round. So he's no easy night out. Like, his last couple of losses have been against Nikita Krylov and Magomed Ankalaev. He has a win over Paul Craig in between there, a win over Alexander Rakic before that. And that, he's basically been... He's been a handful for most guys that he's fought. This is a great test for Carlos Ulberg. Now, Carlos, the city kickboxing guy, isn't he? And he's in the UFC so far, 6-1 in the UFC. And the guys he's beaten, not at that same level that Ozdemir has been fighting. He's been coming in against the likes of Alonzo Menfield and Dawoon Young, Ihor Potieria. So guys that, if you think you're good or if your ambitions to be going somewhere in this division, you need to be getting past those guys. Volkan Ozdemir is a different kettle of fish to some of those opponents, So if he can get a win here, if Carlos Ulberg can get a win here against Volkan Ozdemir, he then becomes talked about as maybe fighting for, a number 1 contender spot kind of thing. He might be a guy that they can even start pushing towards a title. I mean, we know that Magomed Ankalaev is probably going to fight Johnny Walker at some point over the next few months for that title. And then I start to turn to, who's next in the division. That's assuming that, Alex Pereira, not Johnny Walker. That's assuming that Alex Pereira doesn't go off and fight in the heavyweight division and slow the whole division down. Carlos Ulberg might find himself, in there with a win here and maybe one more over another decent name. He could find himself absolutely in that title discussion. Moving down the card here, I will zip through these. There's a lot of Chinese names on this card. There's Ozzy Diaz is fighting, he's an American, of course. He's fighting Mingyang Zhang. I'm moving into the prelims now, and on the prelims, we've got the finales of the Road to UFC show. So you got Su Young-yu and Balgin Genesuli. You've got Kiru Sahota, and you've got Dong Hoon Choi, Korean fighter. And then you've got Zhao Kan Feng and Ming Shi. So I'm not going to pretend to know a hell of a lot about any of those fighters. I have not watched any of Road to UFC. Spencer has done some previews on the UFC website, I believe, if you want to check those ones out. But Further down the card, there is one other fight. I'll circle around it for the moment and just give you a run through of who's there. In the men's flyweight division, we got Carlos Hernandez, and he is fighting. Biggest test of difficult names on the card here. Nyamjargal Two Men Dembarel. So that's that was a good stab at that one. I've got below that we've got Long Zhao and Quang Li, and then we have Maheshati Hayasar and Nicolas Mota, Brazilian, in the men's lightweight division. Now there's one other fight there that's really jumping off the page at me, and it's Lon Kavanagh and Jose Ochoa. So those of you who don't know who Lon Kavanagh is, you need to go and check this guy out. He fought in Cage Warriors. He's 7-0 now, yeah. So his last fight was that absolutely spectacular win on the Dana White's Contender Series just a couple of months back. And prior to that, he had been tearing up trees in the Cage Warriors flyweight division. Probably the fastest, most dynamic, most impressive striker I've seen at that level in the last couple of years. He really was on the rise, and he was tearing through opponents. Chinese born, I believe, but we know him as a London fighter, a London based fighter. But just a spectacular guy to watch. The finishes he got in his Cage Warriors career, the speed, the power. He's got physicality for a flyweight, which I think is going to play a part in this fight. He's 7-0, and so is his opponent Jose Ochoa. Now Jose is making his UFC debut, but I've watched a little bit of this guy. So his last fight was on LFA. Prior to that, he had fought on Combate Global and a couple of other promotions. I watched his fights on LFA and Combate, and he's taller and longer. I don't know what the reach difference is for each fighter, but I know that he's a couple of inches taller, maybe 3 inches taller than Lon Kavanagh. He has long arms and legs, so I think that's going to be a thing that you're going to see maybe play a part in this. He might try and keep Kavanagh at distance, but physically he doesn't look as thick, as dense, as strong as his opponent. He looks a little skinny at the weight, even at flyweight, because he's that bit taller and longer. And I think Kavanagh can maybe have the power advantage over him. Now, this guy does have, like I mentioned, he's 7-0. He does have 6 KOs or TKOs on that record, and 1 submission. So he finishes fights. Looks can be deceptive. But I think if Kavanagh can just sort of get into his range, I think he might just be a step up in levels too much for this guy. But 2 absolute unbeaten killers going into this one. I think that one is going to be absolutely the fight to watch. Lon Kavanagh has the potential to be, to be a bit of a superstar for the UFC if they just manage him right and give him the time. I'm just looking for the Cage Warriors card here on my Tapology, just so I can call it for you guys. But yeah, if they can give Lon Kavanagh the time to develop, he's got real potential there. The other fight card I want to check out this weekend, I want to try and catch most of these fights if I can. I'll have to catch a lot of them on the aftermath, because I'll be, like I mentioned, I'll be commentating calling fights at the same time. But there's Cage Warriors 181, and it's taking place in Newcastle, and there are 3 title fights atop the card. And I'm not going to go through the card, but I'll talk you through those title fights and what to look out for here. So Harry Hardwick defends. He makes the first defense of his Cage Warriors featherweight belt. He won the vacant belt against Orlando Prinz earlier this year. And now him and George, of course, his brother, they're simultaneous Cage Warriors champions, featherweight and lightweight. So Harry is defending his belt, and he's in there against Kweni Lopez, who is this guy's on an absolute tear. A Cage Warriors debut for this guy, but he is coming in there on, I think, an 11-fight win streak. He's 11-1. I think he lost his debut, lost and drew one, and then has won the last 11, and a hell of a lot of knockouts on that record. He looks like a powerhouse, another former LFA fighter. I think he won a belt in LFA, if I'm not mistaken. He's just got that one-hit quitter power. I spoke to Harry Hardwick. I did an interview for MMA Succa a couple of weeks ago with him, and I spoke to him on the record and off the record about this fight. And what he had to say was basically, Kweni Lopez's only opportunity to win this fight is by knocking him out, whereas he feels like he can win every. What the line he said to me was, every second of every minute of every round. So he believes he's the better fighter anywhere and everywhere this fight goes, and he's going to dictate the pace of this fight, and he's not going to allow Kweni Lopez to land that big bomb. and he basically assured me afterwards that he's going to smash this guy up. So I'm interested to see how the fight plays out. That's after watching tape on both of them. That's how I would also see the fight. I would think that Hardwick will maybe just be of too high a quality all round for this guy. But there is always the jeopardy that the sense of jeopardy that someone like Coeny Lopez brings. He has the potential to knock you out and finish the fight with that one power shot. So yeah, fascinating matchup. In the co-main event, this one is one I for like a year I've been hoping to see this fight. Shaj Hack is back and he is going to defend his flyweight championship against Nicolas LeBlanc. Now, Shaj Hack, I was there when he won the belt in Rome. It would have been the summer of 2023, and he hasn't really fought since. He had some injury issues, and then he and his wife had another kid, and he just took some downtime. He opened a new gym, so he's finally back after a bit of a layoff. This match was scheduled a few months ago, but Hack had to pull out with an injury. They had to postpone it. And he's in there with Nicolas LeBlanc, who has been knocking guys out. And I'll give you a little run through because I was there when he beat Ryan Curtis via Bulldog choke. That was April 2023 in the 3 Arena, and he's had a couple of impressive fights since. Yeah, that was April 2023, and then he knocked out Michelangelo Lupoli over in Rome in October last year, and I was at that one too. And it was one of the most impressive knockouts I've seen in person. A little step through uppercut. It was absolutely sensational. Got power in his hands, knocked out Scott Malone in the next fight after that. That was April of this year. And then in July, he got a decision victory up a weight class on very short notice against Gerasimos Suotis. I believe that was that one of the fight when Amir Malikpour was cancelled. Yeah, so you got a short notice change of opponent and up a weight class. So this guy has been looking sensational. You know, he's been looking like real quality, real danger. And he's in there with Shaj Hack. And Shaj Hack, for me now, that performance where he won the belt, it was absolutely sensational. It was against Mikael, what's his name? The former Cage Warriors bantamweight champion who relinquished the belt to move down to flyweight and challenge Mikael Martignoni. There we go. I know the fella. I should remember names, but it was a brilliant performance. And I said this to Shaj a few weeks ago when I spoke to him. It was one of the best 5-round performances I've seen. He won pretty dominantly. I think nearly every round, and he controlled the tempo of the fight. He was able to get in and out and do his damage. His footwork was awesome. His angles, he was just exiting the pocket all the time very safely. Get in, land the shots, get out of harm's way. Martignoni was looking for that one big shot to finish the fight, but just could not pin him down. And I think that could possibly be the way that this fight plays out too. If Shaj Hack, that version of Shaj Hack turns up, he can absolutely do that to Nicolas LeBlanc again. You know, he can be elusive, he can be quick, he can be sharp, and he can pick this guy apart. But just like the main event, there is always, always, always the risk of that one big knockout shot. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And there's one other belt on the line as well. So three title fights in a row, which is nuts. Kennedy Freeman is fighting for the vacant women's bantamweight championship against Mafalda Carmona. Now, Mafalda Carmona is coming in there. I think like a lot of the women that are fighting Kennedy Freeman, they're kind of being brought in to fight her because I don't think there's a division as such. Yeah, she's fought in KSW. She's fought a few other places. Soko Fighting Championship, Kingdom. But yeah, so she looks decent, 7-2 record. But again, having not really seen her in action, Portuguese fighter, it's difficult to know what to expect. But I have seen Kennedy Freeman in action. She's the daughter of Ian the Machine Freeman, the UK's first ever UFC fighter. And, she's picked up a couple of impressive knockouts in her two Cage Warriors appearances? It is so far. I was there at the first one last year and I had the chance to actually chat to her dad, which was cool because, he's a legend of the sport, really, especially in this part of the world, and an absolute gentleman, lovely guy. So they are clearly seeing some promise in Kennedy Freeman now that they've got her in. She's got a couple of knockouts already, and now they're positioning her there to perhaps get her hands on a world title. And we've seen how that goes. Once you get the fighters in that position, like Molly McCann, I think was the last Cage Warriors female champion. It's a really good springboard onto success. So those are the three fights to look out for on that card. The Cage Warriors 181 It's a solid offering from them, and coming hot on the heels of James Webb winning that the light heavyweight belt just last week at Cage Warriors 180. It's all go really for those guys at the moment. They're finishing the year strong. I think they've one more show in San Diego, and then they're done for the year. So looking forward to finding out when they're going to be back in Ireland. Hoping it's soon. While I have you, I interviewed James Webb just today, and it's on the Severe MMA YouTube channel as well. So it was nice to actually chat to him after the fact, after him winning the belt, rather than we were initially going to do our interview in the lead up to the fight. But I think, you always get to talk to fighters in the lead up to fights, but you never get to talk to them a few days after when the dust has settled. So a really interesting chat with James Webb. Go check it out. Right, told you I wasn't going to keep you too long, but I kept you for 25 minutes. So that's how these things usually go. I get on here thinking I'm going to just talk for 10 minutes, gloss over the card, and all of a sudden we're still going, and we're almost half an hour in. So I'll cut it there. And thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. I hope you enjoy the fights this weekend, and I will see you next time.